Hi, it's Baz, filmmaker, dad, and the guy behind 20 Minute Gamer. Winter has finally hit the UK properly this week. You know the phase, where the cold feels like it's permanently settled into your bones, the sky goes grey at about 2 PM, and you instinctively start to reach for hot chocolate or anything remotely cozy. So naturally I thought, you know what, let's play The Long Dark, the famously bleak, freezing survival game where nothing is cozy and everything wants you dead. I've had this one sitting on my wishlist on Steam for ages. It always looked atmospheric, slow and moody, and I figured today was the right time to see whether its icy wilderness could hook me within the sacred 20-minute window. So I fired it up, tightened my virtual scarf and headed out into the snow. Story. Now let's be completely honest, I didn't realise until after my playthrough that The Long Dark actually has a dedicated story mode and that it's part of an add-on or DLC. But for my 20-minute session I played the core original survival mode, which is intentionally light on story and heavy on things like you're cold, hungry and going to die unless you figure out things very quickly. In those 20 minutes, here's what I gathered. You wake up in a frozen forest with the barest hint of context. There's been a plane crash apparently, but there's absolutely no wreckage anywhere near you, not even a stray suitcase or a trail of debris. What I did find, however, were 2 frozen corpses, which is a grim way to start a game, but very on brand for the tone. I looted them, respectfully I promise, and kept moving. The world tells its story more through the environment than through exposition. A note I found left behind in an abandoned cabin hinted that other people had been stranded here before me, which added a layer of quiet tragedy to the situation. And as night rolled in, the distant appearance of some lights, which were possibly from a tower or an antenna, created just enough intrigue to keep me curious. There's definitely some mystery here, but it is subtle. It's survival first, storytelling second, and for this particular mode, that's absolutely fine. Score, 5 out of 10. Controls. I started out with keyboard and mouse because that's my default setup for most survival games, until I realised that I couldn't find the jump button. I checked the settings, nothing. I hit every key on the keyboard like a panicked toddler discovering sugar for the first time, but still nothing. Eventually I realised the truth, there just is no jump button in this game. Now on one hand this is quite realistic, I guess nobody's leaping around like Mario when trudging through waist-deep Canadian snow, but on the other hand it means tiny rocks and low ledges become surprisingly dramatic obstacles. I quickly switched to a gamepad in the hopes that my muscle memory would magically locate a jump somewhere, but nope, it's still not an option. Aside from that, movement is fairly simple. You click to pick up items, you manage your stamina and interact with things like workbenches, cupboards, drawers and crafting materials. Stamina drains quickly, which means sprinting is a short-lived luxury, and you're constantly aware of your temperature, hunger, thirst, and exhaustion. I chose easy mode because I'm still relatively new to hardcore survival games, but even then, the near total lack of a tutorial left me feeling a little bit abandoned, which I suppose is kind of the point. You're meant to feel vulnerable, confused, and slightly out of your depth, but even so, there were a few moments where I genuinely didn't know if I was doing something right or whether I was seconds from death. Overall, it was functional, a little bit limited, intentionally clunky, but fairly effective. Score, 5 out of 10. Atmosphere. This is where The Long Dark excels for me. From the very first steps, I felt like I'd stepped into a frozen BBC nature documentary narrated by my own internal panic. The sound of boots compressing the snow, the unsettling whistle of the wind, and the muted, washed-out visuals immediately created a sense of cold that felt almost physical. Movement is slow, deliberate, and slightly heavy, everything reminding you that nature is enormous and you are very much not. I found myself genuinely planning every small excursion. Do I really want to walk over that hill? Do I risk going deeper into the woods? Will I freeze if I'm out too long? And will I find my way back? That constant internal questioning is brilliant immersion. I even got lost repeatedly, which added brief moments of panic despite the outward calm of the setting. It's clever game design. The fear doesn't come from monsters but from the environment itself. And then night fell. The aurora appeared, painting the sky with greens and purples. The whole world transformed from bleak and silent to surreal and beautiful. Even the distant silhouette of an antenna on the horizon suddenly felt quite magical, like the game was offering a tiny flicker of hope. The immersion is simply exceptional. Score, 9 out of 10. Music and sound. The game's audio design is incredibly effective. Music takes a deliberate backseat for most of the experience, giving your ears space to focus on the world itself. The environmental sound effects like the wind, the snow, and the crunch of footsteps all feel incredibly tactile. One detail I loved was how the sound of your kit changed depending on how much you were carrying. Extra items would make slight clinks and jingles as you walked, and that level of care really grounded the experience. When the aurora appeared, that's when the music kicked in, and it shifted it into something more synthesized and almost sci-fi, ethereal and atmospheric. It matched the visual spectacle perfectly and elevated the moment, but there was one small issue. Your character's voice acting is extremely clean. It's studio clean, it's podcast clean. It's not I'm freezing to death in the wilderness and I can barely breathe clean. He'll be panting and exhausting in gameplay and then suddenly speak like he's doing an audiobook in a cozy recording booth with a warm mug of coffee.
I could use this.
This contrast broke the immersion more than a few times. Also, I don't think I need a commentary on every tin of food with lines like, I can probably eat this. Yeah, I get it, it's food. Aside from that though, excellent audio work. Score, 8 out of 10. Graphics and style. The Long Dark doesn't go for photorealism, and while part of me initially wanted something more like Hunter Call of the Wild, I completely understand why they went for stylized instead. In a realistic world, items like sticks, matches, or tiny tools would be impossible to see. The stylized art direction means important objects do stand out against the snow, making the world both functional and distinct. The environment is intentionally sparse, cold, and minimalistic, and it really works. During the daytime, everything feels oppressive and lonely, but then when night fell and the aurora came out, the entire visual palette shifted into something more breathtaking. Even the animals looked pretty great. The silhouettes and movements were readable from a distance, and I found myself pausing to just watch them wandering around, the same way you sometimes stop to watch wildlife on a winter walk. Overall, the visuals do exactly what they need to do, and they do it fairly well. Score, 7 out of 10. Gameplay. So gameplay is the one area where my 20-minute format really works against the game. You're dropped into the world with no tutorial, no guidance, and nothing but your own instincts to rely on, and that can make the opening feel a bit slow and directionless. I did the sensible survival things. I tried to find some shelter, I looked for high ground to scout the area, I followed the hill down to a cabin, I gathered some materials, tools, and tinned food, and I pretty much tried not to die. The cabin I found was fully stocked, which is thanks to easy mode, and it offered warmth, crafting materials, food, and a bed. So once I settled in, I was reluctant to wander too far away. After getting lost a few times, I ended up sleeping just to pass the time. Waking up in pitch black darkness was both hilarious and mildly terrifying as I shuffled around the room trying to find my light source that I left on the desk. When I finally stepped outside and saw the aurora lighting up the sky, it did feel like the game had finally started to open up, but by that point my 20 minutes were almost up. I ended the session heading towards a distant antenna which I'd seen sparkling in the night, full of curiosity but sadly out of time. The core issue for me is that there's simply not much you can do if you really only do have 20 minutes. Survival does need a slow build-up, it needs incremental progress and long-term planning, so in the 20-minute window it does feel a little bit limited, but the potential is absolutely there if you have more than 20 minutes to play. Score, 4 out of 10. The standout moment for me was entering the blackness and seeing the antenna glowing on the horizon underneath that aurora. It was easily one of the most atmospheric moments I'd had in any survival game, and it really made me just want to explore. Final verdict, is this worth 20 minutes? The Long Dark is genuinely impressive, and it looks great, it sounds great, and it builds an atmosphere that's both oppressive and beautiful, but as a 20-minute experience it does struggle a bit. It's not really designed for quick dips, it's designed for long, slow-burning sessions where you gradually build up your supplies, push deeper into the wilderness, and discover the world at a deliberate pace. Did I enjoy my short time with it? Honestly, yes. Even though I felt cold, isolated, hopeless, and incredibly aware that I was probably going to die within the hour, which is exactly how the game wants you to feel. But can I recommend this as a quick 20-minute play? Not really. You're not going to get much out of it in that short window, I'm afraid. As a full survival experience though, I think this is going to be absolutely worth your time if you have the time available to put into it. Final score, 7 out of 10. So what about you? Does the cold, slow, atmospheric survival vibe appeal to you? Have you put hours into this one and uncovered things I barely scratched the surface of? Let me know in the comments. I genuinely love hearing what other players have discovered. And if you're anything like me, you don't have hours and hours to sink into every game, and that's why I test whether a game can hook you in just those first 20 minutes. Thanks for watching. Please do give me a subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
you